We spend so much of our lives pushing, pulling, striving, trying to make things happen, as though the whole universe were a stubborn door that refuses to open unless we lean our entire weight against it. And yet, have you noticed? Most doors open inward. If you push too hard, you only jam them tighter. We are taught, almost from the moment we can walk, that life is a kind of contest, that you must exert yourself, apply effort, drive your will into the world. And so, we grow up clenching our minds, tightening our muscles, worrying ourselves into motion. We push our way through time. We force ourselves to succeed, to understand, to love, to be spiritual, even to relax. We make relaxation into another form of strain. But life, you see, doesn't work that way. Life isn't a machine to be forced. It's more like a melody, and you can't rush a melody without spoiling its song. Now, I don't mean you should sit about and do nothing. I don't mean you should let life slide by in laziness. But there's a very subtle art to letting things happen, to doing without forcing. The Taoists of China had a lovely word for it: Wu Wei, effortless action, action without strain. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? Action without doing. But the meaning is quite simple once you feel it. It means moving in accord with the rhythm of things, like a surfer who rides the wave instead of trying to push it. He doesn't create the wave, he doesn't command it, he simply aligns himself with it. And so he moves effortlessly, beautifully, because he trusts its power. You see, the moment you begin to force life, you separate yourself from it. You create this division between me and what I want. And that tension makes everything harder. It's like trying to swim while holding your breath. You can't possibly float that way. Stop for a moment. Notice your own body. Right now, there's breathing happening, without any effort from you. Your heart is beating, your blood moving, your thoughts rising and falling like waves on the sea. And you who think you are in control had nothing to do with any of it. You can't will your heart to beat faster for very long. You can't consciously digest your breakfast. Life does all of this for you, automatically. It lives you, in a sense, and if you try to interfere too much, you only disturb the natural flow. So, when I say don't force anything, I'm inviting you to trust this flow, to let life live itself through you, without so much interference from the little anxious voice that says, I must make it happen. Imagine a flower trying to bloom by effort. It would strain, tighten, shiver in the sunlight, and yet its petals would never open that way. The flower doesn't say, I must become beautiful. It simply grows, because growing is its nature. And so with you, you are not apart from the universe. You are the universe, expressing itself as this person, in this moment. When you fight the flow of life, you're like a wave trying to resist the ocean. But when you surrender, then the energy of the whole sea carries you. Now, that word surrender, it frightens people. They think it means giving up, but it doesn't mean that at all. It means giving in to what is real, to what's already happening. Let's take an example. Imagine you're trying to remember a name. You know it's there, on the tip of your tongue, but the more you try to drag it out, the further it slips away. You frown, you strain, you say, it's right there, I almost have it, and it doesn't come. But then, later, when you're washing the dishes, or walking outside, or doing something completely unrelated, suddenly the name pops right into your head. Why? Because you stopped forcing. You gave your mind a little room to breathe. And in that space, the answer came all by itself. That's how the whole of life works. The harder you clutch it, the less it responds. The tighter you try to hold water, the more it escapes through your fingers. And so, the art of living is not the art of controlling, but of allowing. To allow is not weakness, it's wisdom. There's a rhythm to things, a kind of breathing of the world. Expansion and contraction, growth and decay, rising and falling. Everything follows this movement. If you try to interrupt it, if you try to always be up, always expanding, always winning, you break the balance and the whole thing becomes painful. But if you can trust that the low tide will always return to high, that every night carries the dawn within it, then you begin to move differently. You stop fighting and you begin to dance. You see, Not forcing doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become responsive, like a tree bending in the wind, rather than snapping beneath it. The tree doesn't resent the wind. It flows with it, and that's what makes it strong. Now, imagine for a moment that life is like music. You wouldn't sit through a symphony just to hear the last note, would you? You'd let yourself be carried by the sound, moment by moment. You wouldn't say to the orchestra, "Hurry up, get to the end," because the beauty lies in the unfolding. And yet, that's how most of us live, always trying to reach the conclusion, the answer, the success, always forcing the tempo. But the meaning of life, you see, isn't in the conclusion, it's in the playing. When you stop forcing, you begin to hear the music that was always there, the music of now. Stop and listen. You may hear the sound of your own breathing, the hum of the room, the quiet pulse of the world beneath it all. That's life, effortlessly being itself. It doesn't need your command. It doesn't need your push. When you force something, you imply that life is not enough as it is. That this moment must be different before it can be complete. But this moment right now is perfect in its unfolding, even in its imperfection, because what we call imperfection is just life still in motion. It hasn't finished its dance yet. Don't rush the dance. Don't force the rhythm. Think of a caterpillar forcing its way out of a cocoon before its wings are ready. It may tear itself apart trying to escape the process that is meant to strengthen it. The struggle of emergence is part of the becoming. But the timing, the when, is not the caterpillar's to decide. When you force yourself to bloom before your time, you suffer. When you resist blooming, when your time has come, you suffer again. So, don't force, don't resist, just trust the unfolding. It's quite funny, really, we go through life thinking we are the doer, when in truth, we are being done. You don't beat your heart, it beats you. You don't think thoughts, thoughts think themselves. You don't even breathe, breathing breathes you. And the more you realize this, the more you begin to laugh, because you see the cosmic joke of it all. You were never in control, and you never needed to be. You can work hard, yes, you can move, create, explore, but when you do it because it's delightful, not because you must. Work becomes play when it's no longer forced. Even discipline can be gentle when it's born from love rather than fear. A musician practices not because he's anxious to be perfect, but because he loves the sound. A gardener tends the soil not to command it, but to be part of its miracle. This is the kind of action that flows effortless, joyful, real. Stop for a moment and consider, what happens in your life when you stop trying to make everything happen? What space opens when you let go of the steering wheel for just a breath? You find that things keep happening anyway, and often more beautifully than you could have planned. That's because forcing narrows the field of life. It blinds you to possibility. But when you release control, life reveals paths you didn't even know were there. You see, when a river meets a rock, it doesn't fight it, it flows around it. It still reaches the sea, just by another route. So when life seems to block your way, perhaps it isn't an obstacle at all, but a nudge, a redirection. If you force your way through the rock, you'll only hurt yourself. But if you let go, you find another way, one that's already waiting for you. It's not laziness, it's intelligence, the intelligence of water, the wisdom of yielding. And isn't that what peace really is? Not the absence of motion, but the absence of resistance. So, what happens when you truly stop forcing? Something remarkable. You begin to notice that life has its own intelligence, an intelligence far greater than the anxious plans of the mind. It's the same intelligence that turns an acorn into an oak, that guides the stars in their orbits, that shapes the tides and the winds. And that same intelligence is moving through you, this very moment. It doesn't need your attention to operate. It only asks for your cooperation. When you stop forcing, you don't lose direction, you gain alignment. You no longer act against the current, you move with it. And in that movement, your actions gain a quiet power. They stop being the jerky motions of fear and become the graceful gestures of trust. You see, the paradox is this: the less you try to control life, the more you find yourself in harmony with it. The more you relax into uncertainty, the more certain you feel because you've discovered that you don't need to know what's next to be alive right now. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. And mysteries reveal themselves only when you stop demanding answers. They bloom in silence, like night blooming flowers that open only when you stop shining your flashlight at them. Stop. Listen. Can you feel that quiet movement beneath thought? That gentle hum of being? That's you before you began trying to be someone. That's the effortless self, the one that doesn't need to prove or perform, the one that doesn't rush to fix or to force. It's been here all along, waiting patiently for you to stop struggling. We live in a world that glorifies effort, doesn't it? We are told that success belongs to those who grind the hardest, that peace comes from conquering the mind, that love must be earned, enlightenment achieved. But all of that is just more forcing, dressed in spiritual clothing. Real peace, real freedom, arises when you let go of the idea that you must attain them. Because the moment you chase peace, it runs. The moment you try to force stillness, the mind trembles. But when you stop chasing, when you simply notice what is, peace reveals itself. As quietly as dawn spilling through an open window. You can't make the sun rise by shouting at it. You can only watch in stillness, as it does inevitably, perfectly, on its own time. And that's how everything unfolds. Love, growth, clarity, purpose, they arise when the soil of your being is soft, when you're not pressing so hard for them to grow. Imagine you're trying to catch a soap bubble. If you snatch at it, it bursts. But if you open your hand gently, it may land right there, glimmering for a moment before floating away. That's how joy works, how love works, how truth works. You can only hold them by not holding at all. Now, many people fear that if they stop forcing, nothing will happen, that without pressure, they'll lose all direction, become lazy or indifferent. But this is misunderstanding the nature of life. You see, the universe abhors stillness only when it's dead, and you are not dead. You're brimming with life. There's a deep spontaneity in you that wants to move, to create, to dance. When you stop forcing, you don't fall into inertia, you fall into rhythm. That rhythm may be slow at times, fast at others, but it's never forced. It's alive. It's like jazz. The beauty of improvisation comes not from controlling every note, but from listening deeply to what wants to happen next. You are part of that great improvisation, the music of existence playing itself through you. And when you try to force the music, you create dissonance. But when you listen, truly listen, you find that the next note comes naturally. The melody unfolds of its own accord. Have you ever noticed that the most beautiful things in life tend to happen when you least expect them? A sudden laugh that lightens your day, a stranger's kindness, a moment of insight that just appears out of nowhere. These things can't be forced. They come as gifts. They come when you stop trying so hard to deserve them. Forcing is the language of fear. Allowing is the language of trust. And trust, real trust, is the essence of peace. Now, I don't mean blind trust, not the kind that ignores reality. I mean a deep trust that even the difficult moments are part of the unfolding. That even confusion, pain, and loss have their own rhythm, their own hidden intelligence. The seed doesn't curse the darkness of the soil. It trusts that the dark is where it must begin. So when life seems heavy, unclear, or still don't force your way out of it, don't demand that spring arrive before winter is done teaching. Because forcing growth before its season only weakens the roots. When the time is right, you'll feel the movement again. You'll feel it the way a bird feels, the change in wind, not by thinking, but by sensing. That's how life guides you when you stop forcing. Not through plans, but through feeling. Listen, right now, there is nothing missing. The universe, in its infinite play, has brought you here, to this moment, breathing, listening, alive. You didn't force your way into existence, did you? You simply appeared. And that miracle continues every second, effortlessly. All forcing is rooted in forgetfulness, forgetting that you are already part of the great design. The mind, when afraid, forgets its belonging and begins to shout commands at the ocean. But the ocean doesn't need to be told what to do. It's already dancing. Sometimes, to remember that truth, you must be still. Not still as in rigid, still as in receptive. Still as a mirror that reflects everything without holding anything. And in that stillness, you realize that nothing ever needed to be forced, because everything has been unfolding perfectly, even the moments that seemed imperfect. The rain that ruins the picnic also feeds the earth. The delay that frustrates you may save your life. The failure that breaks your heart may open it wide enough for real love to enter. There's a hidden grace in what you didn't plan, but you can't see it while you're forcing. You can only see it when you let go. Stop. Breathe. Look around. Everything is happening all by itself. The world turns. The air moves. The body breathes. And you are simply here. The miracle was never about making things happen. It was about noticing that they already are. When you stop forcing, you stop dividing yourself into the doer and the done. You become the happening itself. Life moves, and you move with it. Thought rises, feeling comes, sound, silence, laughter, tears, all of it dances through you like wind through the trees. And the funny thing is, when you live this way, not forcing, but allowing, you actually become more effective, not less. Because your actions come from clarity, not compulsion. They arise naturally, like ripples from a pebble dropped in still water. You see, doing flows best from being, just as words flow best from silence. When you know how to be still, truly still, then everything you do has depth. You're no longer reacting, you're responding. And response is always wiser than reaction. So don't be in such a hurry to fix, to solve, to change. Let life show you what it wants to do next. The universe doesn't rush, and yet everything is accomplished. Even stars are patient. Now, I'll tell you something. You don't have to make your life meaningful. You only have to stop resisting its meaning. It's already here, in the laughter you didn't plan, in the tears you didn't hide, in the ordinary quiet moments between one thought and another. You are the meaning, not the project, not the goal, not the plan. You, this alive.
You know, there's something rather strange that's been happening to you lately. The things that used to light you up don't anymore. That song you played on repeat until your ears bled, now it's just noise. The food you craved tastes like cardboard in your mouth. Even the people you love, the ones whose laughter used to fill your chest with warmth, they feel distant, muted, like you're watching them through glass. And here's what terrifies you most. You're starting to wonder if you've lost the ability to feel anything at all. If something inside you has died and you didn't even notice it dying. But I want to suggest something quite different to you today. What if this numbness isn't death at all? What if it's the most dangerous phase of waking up you'll ever experience? Let me describe it more precisely, because I suspect you know exactly what I'm talking about. You wake up in the morning and there's nothing. No dread. Exactly. No excitement either. Just a kind of gray neutrality that follows you like a shadow. You scroll through your phone looking for something, anything that might spark that old feeling. A video, a message, a piece of news that matters. Nothing lands. You try your old escapes. Maybe you binge a series you used to love. Maybe you buy something you don't need. Maybe you reach for a drink, a substance, a person. And here's the truly terrifying part. Even when you get what you wanted, even when the thing arrives or the experience happens, there's no payload, no rush, no satisfaction. It's like biting into fruit and tasting only texture. The sweetness is gone, and you start to panic, don't you? You start running through possibilities in your mind. Am I depressed? Is this a chemical imbalance? Did I burn myself out? Am I broken? You might even go to a doctor. Get tested. Try medications. Read articles about dopamine and serotonin, about hedonic adaptation and anhedonia, and maybe some of that helps, or maybe it doesn't. Because what if I told you that what you're experiencing isn't a malfunction at all? What if this loss, this death of the old joy, is actually a birth in disguise? To understand what I mean, we need to look at what we've been calling joy all these years. Because I don't think you've lost joy. I think you've lost something else entirely. Think back to the last time you felt genuinely happy. Really happy. What was happening? Chances are you weren't just experiencing something pleasant. You were experiencing relief. Relief from hunger when you ate that perfect meal. Relief from loneliness when someone finally texted you back. Relief from boredom when you found that perfect show. Relief from anxiety when the weekend finally arrived. You see, most of what we call pleasure is actually just the cessation of discomfort. It's like this. Imagine you're hitting yourself with a hammer, over and over, and then you stop. The moment you stop feels amazing, doesn't it? Your whole body floods with relief. But that's not happiness. That's just not being hit anymore. This is what the Buddha was pointing at when he said life is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Not that life is suffering exactly, but that it's fundamentally unstable, based on lack. We spend our entire lives in this bizarre cycle. Create a problem, solve the problem, feel good for a moment, create another problem. Make yourself hungry so eating feels good. Make yourself lonely so connection feels good. Make yourself bored so entertainment feels good. We've become like addicts who need the withdrawal just to feel the high of the fix. And for most of your life, this worked. This game of scratching itches you created yourself, it was enough. It felt like living. But then something shifted. Maybe it happened slowly. Maybe it happened all at once. But at some point, your consciousness saw through the trick. It's like when you learn how a magic trick works. Once you see the wires, the mirrors, the sleight of hand, you can't unsee them. The magic is broken forever. You can't go back to being fooled. And this is what's happened to you. You've become immune to your own manipulation. The itch you create no longer feels real enough to make the scratch satisfying. The hunger you manufacture doesn't make the food taste better. The loneliness you cultivate doesn't make connection feel profound. You've seen through it. And once you've seen through it, the whole game collapses. This is why nothing brings you joy anymore. Not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown a fundamentally childish way of experiencing life. And right now, you're in withdrawal. Not from drugs or alcohol, but from something far more addictive. You're in withdrawal from experience itself, from the constant stimulation, the peaks and valleys, the drama of your own creation. You're a thrill addict who's been cut off from the supply. And like any addict in withdrawal, you feel like you're dying. You feel hollow, empty, like a ghost walking through a world that's lost its color. You look at people around you who still seem to be enjoying things, and you feel envious, confused. Why can they still feel and I can't? But they're not more alive than you. They're just still asleep, still willing to believe in the game, still able to get high on their own manufactured crises and resolutions. You can't anymore. I knew a woman once, let's call her Maya, who went through this exact thing. She was a musician. Her whole identity was built around the rush of performing, the high of applause, the intoxication of creating something beautiful. And then one day, she sat down at her piano and nothing. No inspiration, no joy, no connection to the instrument that had been her voice for 20 years. She thought she was finished, thought her gift had been taken away. What she didn't realize was that her gift wasn't music. Her gift was the silence underneath the music. And she was finally becoming quiet enough to hear it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before you can hear the silence, you have to survive the absence of noise. And I know this feels like death. I know it feels like something precious has been taken from you. But stay with me here, because this is where it gets interesting. Imagine you've spent your entire life in a dimly lit room, a room lit only by candles. And you've been fascinated by the shadows these candles cast on the walls, the dancing shapes, the flickering movements. You've spent years watching these shadows, finding meaning in them, being entertained by them, occasionally frightened by them. They've been your whole world. And then one day, someone opens a window, and sunlight, real sunlight, floods into the room. What happens to the shadows? They vanish. Not because the light went out, but because the light became too bright. The candles are still burning, but you can't see their shadows anymore. They're overwhelmed by something infinitely more luminous. And here's the thing. For the first few moments after that window opens, you might actually think you've gone blind. Because your eyes, so accustomed to the dimness, to the subtle variations of shadow, can't yet process this much light. It's too much, too bright, too intense. So it looks like nothing, like emptiness, like a blank, washed out void. This is where you are right now. The window has opened, the light has come in, and your perception, still calibrated for shadows and candlelight, can't yet see what's here. So it feels like nothing, like absence, like loss. But it's not absence. It's presence so complete, so full, that your current way of seeing can't comprehend it yet. You're not depressed. You're not broken. You're being recalibrated. And the worst thing you can do right now, the absolute worst thing, is try to go back. Try to close the window. Try to relight the candles. Try to manufacture shadows again. I've watched people do this. When the old pleasures stop working, they panic and they try to force it. They seek more extreme experiences, louder music, stronger substances, more dangerous thrills. They jump from relationship to relationship, hobby to hobby, belief system to belief system, desperately trying to feel something, anything. And all this does is delay the inevitable. Because you can't go back to sleep once you've woken up. You can pretend. You can exhaust yourself trying. But the innocence is gone. So what do you do instead? Here's what nobody tells you. You stop trying. You stop trying to feel joy. You stop trying to get back what you've lost. You stop trying to fix yourself. Because there's nothing to fix. You're like a caterpillar that's dissolved into liquid inside a cocoon, wondering why it can't walk anymore, why it can't eat leaves, why everything that used to define it is gone. You're not a caterpillar anymore, but you're not yet a butterfly. You're just soup, formless, undefined, in between. And this is unbearable for the mind, isn't it? Because the mind wants to know what it is, wants to have an identity, wants to be something. But you're not something right now. You're nothing becoming everything. You have to give up, you see. Not give up on life. Give up on trying. You have to stop trying to feel joy the way you stopped trying to catch smoke. Stop trying to get back to how things were. You understand? There is no back. There's only this formless moment, this soup you've become. And the more you thrash around trying to be something recognizable, the longer you stay liquid. And if you can just be with this, if you can stop fighting it, stop trying to resurrect the corpse of your old way of being, something new emerges. Not the old joy, something quieter, subtler, harder to describe. The old joy was like fireworks, loud, bright, impressive, but brief. This new thing, it's more like the sky itself. It's not an experience. It's the space in which experience happens. It's not a feeling. It's the awareness that feels. Do you see the difference? The old happiness required contrast, required things to be good or bad, pleasurable or painful, exciting or boring. It needed the hammer so it could feel the relief of stopping. But this doesn't need anything. It's already here, already complete. Whether you're eating a gourmet meal or stale bread, it's here. Whether you're in love or alone, it's here. Whether you're succeeding or failing, it's here. I once knew a man who spent his whole life chasing experiences. He traveled to every country, tried every drug, had every kind of relationship. And then, one day, he just stopped. He sat in his garden, doing nothing, for hours at a time. His friends thought he'd given up, thought he was depressed. But when I asked him about it, he said something I've never forgotten. He said, I finally realized I was traveling around the world, looking for my house, and then I noticed I was already standing in it. This is what happens on the other side of the emptiness. You stop looking for life and realize you are life. You stop searching for joy and discover you are the space in which joy and sorrow both arise and dissolve. You don't need things to be a certain way anymore. Not because you've given up or become numb, but because you've found something that doesn't depend on circumstances. A kind of okayness. Not happiness, exactly. Not bliss. Just okayness. Everything is fundamentally okay, even when it's not okay. Does that make sense? Probably not. Not yet. Because this isn't something you can understand intellectually. It's something you become. And you can't force it. You can't achieve it through effort. In fact, the more you try to get there, the further away you get. It's like trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more awake you become. Just be here. In the grayness, in the flatness, in the void. Without trying to escape it, without trying to fix it, without trying to understand it. Just sit in it like you'd sit in a waiting room. Not enjoying it, not suffering through it. Just waiting. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to get somewhere else, the moment you stop resisting what is, you arrive not at some special state, not at some peak experience. You arrive at reality itself, unfiltered, unmediated, unadorned. And it's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. See, you haven't lost joy. You've just become too big for the small pleasures that used to contain you. Like a child who grows too tall for their favorite hiding spot. The spot didn't disappear. You just don't fit in it anymore. And yes, that's sad in a way. There's a real grief in this. Grief for the simplicity of the old way, for the innocence that's been lost. But would you really want to go back? Would you really want to shrink yourself down just to fit into that small space again? Or would you rather grow into the vastness that's opening up before you? The choice is yours, of course. You can keep trying to light candles in the sunlight. You can keep manufacturing problems so you can feel the relief of solving them. You can keep chasing the ghost of a happiness that was never really happiness at all. Or you can sit here in this uncomfortable in-between and wait. Wait for your eyes to adjust to the light. Wait for a new way of seeing to emerge. Wait for the butterfly you are becoming to finish forming its wings. It won't look like you thought it would. It won't feel like you expected it to. But it will be real. More real than anything you've experienced before. And here's the final thing nobody tells you. The emptiness you're feeling right now, it's not empty. It never was. You've been calling it numbness, calling it depression, calling it death. But it's none of those things. It's just space. Space that was always there, hidden beneath the noise. Space that was always holding everything. The joy, the sorrow, the hunger, the satisfaction. You are that space. Not the things moving through it. Not the feelings coming and going. The space itself. And space doesn't need anything to be complete. It doesn't need to be filled. It doesn't need to be fixed. It just is. So when you ask, why doesn't anything bring me joy anymore? You see, the great cosmic joke is that everyone is trying to arrive somewhere they've never actually left. Isn't that strange? The whole of our modern life is built on this curious illusion that there's a point in the future just around the corner where life will finally begin. We imagine it when we get the right job or find the right person or earn enough or meditate long enough or become spiritually awake enough. But as a matter of fact, the thing we're searching for is the thing that's already happening right now. Let me put it this way. You can't become what you already are, any more than a wave can become water. It is water. The search itself is the disguise, the game of pretending to be lost so that we can enjoy the adventure of finding ourselves again. Now then, most people don't see this because they've been trained since birth to think of life as a journey in a straight road from A to B, from ignorance to wisdom, from sin to salvation, from childhood to success. But the funny thing about a journey like that is it always keeps the present moment just slightly out of reach, always something to strive toward, always a horizon to chase. And so you end up running on a treadmill that never moves. You know, I once compared time to the grooves on a record. The needle runs along, playing the melody of existence, but every note is happening now. The past isn't something behind you. It's a memory echoing in this very instant. The future isn't somewhere ahead. It's an idea shimmering in your imagination. There is, in truth, only this continuous, eternal now. But the human mind, the tricky fellow that it is, wants to grasp this moment and make it last. It wants to freeze it like a photograph, to say, there it is, I've got it. And the moment it tries, it slips through its fingers. You see, the present isn't a thing you can hold. It's more like a song you can only hear by letting it move. Try to stop it, and it disappears. Now, here's the real mischief. The more you chase the future, the more it runs away. It's like trying to catch your own shadow. The faster you go, the further it flees. And so you become haunted by this feeling of incompleteness, this vague anxiety that something is missing, that you are missing. But let me ask you something. Who is it exactly that's missing? What is this you that's supposed to arrive? The mind creates an image, a better version of yourself, more peaceful, more enlightened, more in control. And that image becomes your God. You kneel before it in silent worship, forever praying to become what you already are. Isn't it funny? The more we seek awakening, the more we affirm our own sleep. Because seeking implies that the thing we want is somewhere else. Yet awakening is precisely the seeing that there's nowhere else to go. You can't wake up later. Now then, imagine a cat sitting in the sun. It's not thinking, if I just purr hard enough, I'll finally become a proper cat. It doesn't strive to be, it is. And that's why it's so effortlessly itself. Whereas we, with all our cleverness, are forever running in circles around our own being, mistaking movement for progress. You've already arrived, but you don't believe it, because it doesn't feel like arrival. You were expecting fireworks, a certificate from the universe, some cosmic pat on the back saying, congratulations, you made it. But instead, there's just this quiet hum of existence, this breath, this moment. And because we've been conditioned to believe that ordinary life is somehow unspiritual, we overlook it. We chase transcendence, all the while trampling the sacred ground beneath our own feet. The birds outside your window, the sound of your breathing, the simple act of being, this is it. Not preparation for it, it. You see, reality is not a path, it's a dance floor. And the point of dancing is not to arrive somewhere, but to move, to express, to play. But we've forgotten how to play because we've taken the whole thing much too seriously. We think existence is an exam we might fail instead of a performance we're meant to enjoy. Now then, the question is not how to reach enlightenment, but how to notice that you are never separate from it. Now then, most people ask, if I've already arrived, why doesn't it feel that way? Well, you see, that's because feeling is a kind of echo. The mind is always a few seconds behind the music. You notice happiness after it's happened. You recognize clarity once the clouds have already passed. In other words, you're always looking at life in the rearview mirror, wondering why the road seems to move while you stay still. But what if the whole trick of life is that you are the road, that everything you've ever been chasing, peace, purpose, love, awakening, has never been ahead or behind, but simply here, wearing the disguise of the ordinary? The reason only a few ever glimpse this is because the rest are busy trying to understand it. The intellect, clever as it is, keeps chewing on the words like a dog with a bone, thinking that meaning is something you swallow rather than something you notice. You see, awakening isn't an achievement. It's the collapse of the one who thought he had to achieve it. Let me put it this way. A fish doesn't need to understand the ocean to swim, and you don't need to understand the present moment to live in it. But the moment you try to explain it, You step outside it, just slightly, like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Isn't it funny how we do that? We keep asking, what's the purpose of life, as though life were a riddle to be solved, when in fact, it's the solver who's the riddle. Life has no purpose apart from living, just as music has no destination apart from being played. If the meaning of a song were only in its final note, you'd never listen to the melody. You'd rush through it to get to the end. And that's precisely what most of us are doing with our lives. We hurry, we strive, we accumulate. Not because we need more, but because we're terrified of stopping. Stillness feels like death to the ego. Yet, it's in stillness that the self begins to dissolve into something infinitely larger. Like a drop of water returning to the ocean, it doesn't lose itself, it realizes itself. Now, the odd thing about awakening is that it's often mistaken for despair in the beginning, because when the walls of illusion start to crumble, you see how much of your life was built on make-believe. The stories, the roles, the endless performing, gone. And at first, that feels like loss. You think, my God, I'm disappearing. But what's actually vanishing is the mask, not the face behind it. You know, people say they want enlightenment, but what they really mean is they want to feel good all the time. But awakening isn't about feeling good, it's about seeing clearly. And once you see clearly, even your sadness becomes sacred. You stop dividing the world into good and bad, spiritual and unspiritual, success and failure. You see it all as one magnificent play, sometimes tragic, sometimes comic, but always whole. And here's the curious paradox. When you stop running from discomfort, it begins to soften. When you stop trying to fix the moment begins to breathe again. Because resistance is what makes life feel hard. The river doesn't struggle to flow, it only struggles when it meets the dam we've built across it. The dam of judgment, expectation, and fear. So, when I say, you've already arrived, I'm not inviting you to complacency. I'm inviting you to intimacy with this very breath, this sound, this fleeting second that will never happen again. To see that this right now is the miracle. The awakening is not in some future paradise. It's in this cup of tea, this heartbeat, this quiet awareness listening to my words. There's nothing missing. There never was. Now then, when you begin to see this, really see it, something inside relaxes for the first time. You stop trying to hold your breath in eternity. You begin to trust that life is carrying you, even when you don't know where. That's what I mean by arrival. It's not a destination, it's a surrender. You see, the reason so few people awaken is not because it's difficult, but because it's too simple. The mind is always looking for something complicated to do, some mountain to climb, some riddle to solve, and when it's told that the truth is already here, it refuses to believe it. It's as if someone spent years searching for their glasses, only to discover they've been on their nose the whole time. And isn't that funny? You can't see what's seeing. You can't stand apart from awareness to catch it. You are it. Awareness can never be grasped because it's doing the grasping. So the whole pursuit of awakening, all the striving, the techniques, the comparisons, that's the dream trying to wake itself up. It's perfectly fine as a game, you understand. But it's only a game. Because what you truly are doesn't need improvement, just recognition. Now, people often say to me, but if I stop striving, won't I become lazy, passive, indifferent? Not at all. You see, when action springs from understanding rather than ambition, it becomes graceful. It's like the way a tree grows or a river flows, without effort, without anxiety. The doing happens naturally once the doer stops interfering. When you know you've already arrived, you no longer chase experience like a collector chasing butterflies. You stop pinning the moment to the wall. You simply let it flutter, alive and free. And ironically, that's when joy returns, because joy was never lost. It was just smothered under all the trying. You begin to notice small things again. The pattern of light through the window, the taste of morning air, the laughter of a stranger on the street. You're no longer measuring them against what they should be. You're simply seeing, and that's awakening, not fireworks in the sky, but the quiet recognition that even the most ordinary instant is sacred beyond words. Now then, this realization doesn't make you special. It makes you real, because the one who thought he was special, the one chasing awakening like a trophy, dissolves. And what's left is just life, breathing itself, perfectly at ease. Now then, when you finally stop trying to arrive, you begin to notice that everything has already arrived. The clouds are moving without effort, the trees are swaying without purpose, and your heart beats without your permission. You realize that life doesn't need your supervision. It's astonishingly self-sufficient. Isn't it funny? We humans are the only creatures who think the universe can't manage without our advice. We worry about becoming enlightened, as though existence had made a terrible mistake by not consulting us first. But the stars aren't worrying, the rivers aren't worrying, even your breath, that subtle tide of in and out, goes on perfectly without you doing a thing. And this is the final irony. The moment you stop chasing awakening catches you. It was never hiding, you were simply running too fast to notice. It stands behind every breath, beneath every thought, whispering, "Welcome home." Now, what happens when you live from that realization? You stop acting out of fear. You stop performing life and start participating in it. You become spontaneous again, like a child building sandcastles, knowing the tide will come, but building anyway because play itself is the reward. You stop demanding guarantees. You stop trying to outsmart impermanence. You begin to trust the rhythm of things, the arising and the falling, the blooming and the fading. Let me put it this way. The wave doesn't cling to the sea foam and say, "Stay." It rises, dances, collapses. And in that collapse, it finds its return. That's what you are. The universe playing at being a person disappearing into its own laughter. When you understand this, and I mean really understand it, a strange peace enters the heart. You no longer need to control everything. You no longer measure your worth in victories or awakenings or moments of clarity. You see that even confusion has its place in the dance. You begin to love the whole performance, the good, the bad, the absurd, because it's all one act. And so the invitation is simple. Stop waiting for the grand finale. Stop postponing your existence for a future version of yourself.
From the earliest days of childhood, we are haunted by a question. It might begin as a whisper, or a moment of silence after a funeral, or a sudden awareness as you lie awake in bed. What happens when I die? It is perhaps the most ancient and universal of all human questions. Every civilization has told stories about it. Every religion has sought to answer it. And every individual, in quiet moments, has wondered about the end of their own life. We fear it, we resist it, we deny it. We invent heavens and hells, reincarnations and rebirths, all in an attempt to soften the blow of the unknown. Yet no story, no belief can fully erase the raw fact that one day the body will cease, the breath will stop, and all that you think of as you will dissolve. And so the question lingers, what then? For most people, death is the ultimate problem. It is the great wall at the end of the road, the one event you cannot bargain with, escape from, or outsmart. You can postpone it, distract yourself from it, but you cannot avoid it. And this is why so much of life becomes a struggle to avoid thinking about it. We fill our days with noise, with plans, with ambitions, with entertainment, anything to keep us from remembering that each tick of the clock is carrying us closer to that final moment. But in avoiding the thought of death, we give it even more power. Like a shadow that grows darker the more you try to ignore it, death becomes the hidden terror that shapes everything from behind the scenes. Why do people crave legacy? Because they fear being forgotten. Why do they cling to possessions? Because they fear losing themselves. Why do they desperately seek meaning? Because they fear that without it, death will reveal life to have been pointless. Now, here is the problem at the heart of it. We imagine death as an experience that will happen to us. We think of it as the moment we will face darkness, or nothingness, or some judgment. But this imagination contains a flaw. Ask yourself, if you are not conscious, who is there to experience death at all? This is the paradox. We fear nothingness, but nothingness is not something you can ever know. For when you are gone, there is no you left to notice the absence. Just as before you were born, there was no awareness of time passing, no awareness of missing out. Think back, if you can, to before your birth. Where were you in the year 1800, in the year 1500? What was it like? You cannot answer because there was no you to experience it. And in the same way, when the body ceases, there will be no you to miss life, no you to fear death. But still, we resist this truth. The ego, that fragile sense of I, cannot imagine its own end. It clings desperately, like a hand grasping at water, trying to hold itself together. It tells stories of eternal continuation, some of them comforting, some of them terrifying, but all of them built on the same fear, the fear of no longer being. This is why, across the world, people cling to heaven, hell, reincarnation, ghosts, spirits, any image that suggests the story doesn't simply end. Because to the mind, an ending feels like annihilation. But notice, endings are everywhere, and yet they are never absolute. The day ends and night begins. A wave ends, but the sea continues. A note ends, but the music flows on. What if death is not annihilation, but transformation? Not the end of existence, but the end of a particular form of it? Yet here we are, living as though life were a fragile possession that must be clutched tightly, defended at all costs, kept safe from the inevitable. And because of this, many people never truly live. They are so busy trying not to die that they forget to be alive. This is the irony of death. By fearing it, you let it rob you of life long before it arrives. Consider how much of our daily striving is, at its root, an attempt to deny death. We build monuments, hoard wealth, chase fame, create legacies, all to leave a mark that will outlast us. Yet history shows us clearly. Kingdoms crumble, names are forgotten, monuments turn to dust, even the stars themselves burn out. So if the point of life is to secure immortality, the game is lost from the beginning. This is the first problem. We want what cannot be had. We want permanence in a universe that is always changing. We want security in a life that is fundamentally uncertain. We want eternal survival in a cosmos where everything is born, blossoms, and dissolves. And so death terrifies us, not because of what it is, but because of what it reveals, that everything we cling to is temporary, that the ego's demand for permanence is an impossible dream. But what if the problem lies not in death, but in the way we think about it? Because you see, death is not an event that happens in the future. It is happening right now. Cells are dying in your body every moment. Thoughts arise and pass away. Moments appear and vanish into memory. Every breath is a little death, the end of one cycle, the beginning of another. And yet, you are still here. So perhaps death is not the enemy at all, but the very condition of life. Without endings, there would be no beginnings. Without death, there would be no life. But the mind resists this because it wants to think of life as a possession. My life, my body, my future. And when the idea of death comes, it feels like theft, as if life were being taken away from me. Yet what if life was never yours to begin with? What if life is not a possession, but a process? Not a thing you own, but a dance you participate in. When you see it this way, Death ceases to be the thief of life and becomes its partner. The two are inseparable, like the front and back of a coin. Still, the ego insists, but what will become of me? What will happen to the story I have lived, the identity I have built, the memories I have gathered? And the answer is simple. They will dissolve. Just as dreams dissolve when you wake, just as each day dissolves into the next. The story will end, but you are not merely the story. You are the awareness in which the story unfolded. And awareness is not something you can lose because it is not a thing to begin with. This is perhaps the hardest truth to face because it means the ego's demands will never be satisfied. There is no guarantee of permanence. There is no way to hold on to life forever. And yet, there is also liberation in this. For once you stop demanding permanence, you are free to truly live. Imagine a symphony. If you demanded that it never end, if you tried to hold on to the last note forever, you would destroy the music. The beauty of the symphony is in its unfolding, its rise and fall, its movement and conclusion. Life is like that. It is music. It is a dance. And death is not the enemy of the music, but the silence that makes it possible. This is the problem as most people see it. Death as the end, death as the enemy, death as the great void to be avoided. And in resisting it, they suffer twice, once in fear and once in the event itself. But what if we could see it differently? What if death is not something to be feared, but something to be understood, even embraced? That is the possibility we will turn to in the next chapter. If the first chapter was about our fear of death, then let us now look more deeply at its mystery. Because when you stop running from death, you discover it is not an end to life, but the very thing that makes life possible. Consider the seasons. Spring blossoms, summer flourishes, autumn fades, winter rests. Each season gives way to the next. If you tried to cling to summer forever, you would kill the cycle. Without autumn and winter, there could be no renewal of spring. Death is like this. It is not a mistake in the design of life, it is the design. Without it, there would be no change, no growth, no renewal. Life would stagnate, frozen and lifeless. So to see death as the enemy is to miss the larger dance in which it plays an essential role. But what, you may ask, happens to you when you die? Where does your awareness go? This question itself is already mistaken, because it assumes awareness is something you possess, like a coin that can be taken away or returned. But awareness is not in you. You are in it. Think of a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool has a shape, a boundary, an identity. You can point to it and say, "There it island." But if you look closely, you see it is nothing but the river itself, swirling in a particular form. The water flows in, spins, flows out, and the whirlpool vanishes. Yet the river remains. So it is with you. Your body, your mind, your identity, these are the whirlpool. They have a shape, a pattern, a story, but they are made entirely of life itself, flowing in and out. When the whirlpool dissolves, nothing is lost, because the river continues. Death, then, is not annihilation. It is transformation. It is the dissolving of one pattern into the greater flow. But because we cling to the whirlpool, because we think of ourselves as this separate identity, we fear its end. We forget that what we really are is the river, and the river does not die. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize letting go of the ego, because the ego is precisely the illusion that you are separate, that you are a thing, that you are an object moving through time. Death shatters this illusion. But if you awaken before death, if you realize now that you are not the whirlpool, but the river itself, then death loses its sting. You see it for what it is, a change of form, not a destruction of being. Alan Watts often used the metaphor of sleep. Every night you go to sleep, and your sense of self dissolves. Dreams arise and vanish. Hours pass in pure nothingness. And yet you do not fear this. You may even enjoy it. Why, then, do we fear the great sleep of death? Perhaps because we imagine it will last forever. But if you think carefully, forever is not an experience. It is not something you can know. Just as before you were born, you were not sitting in darkness waiting to arrive. You simply were not there. And it was not frightening, because there was no you to be afraid. Death is like this. It is not a darkness into which you will fall. It is the falling away of the one who imagines themselves falling. Now, this realization is not meant to be grim. On the contrary, it is profoundly liberating, because once you see that you are not a fragile object trying to cling to life, but life itself in motion, you can stop worrying about the end. You can begin to live fully, here and now. Think of how differently you would live if you no longer feared death. You would not postpone joy for tomorrow. You would not waste time clinging to grudges or chasing trivial ambitions. You would see each moment as precious, not because it will last forever, but because it will not. Just as a flower is beautiful not despite its brief bloom, but because of it, so life is beautiful because it is fleeting. Death, then, is not the opposite of life. It is the opposite of birth. Life is the dance between them, the movement of appearing and disappearing, arising and dissolving. And when you embrace this, you begin to see that death is not something that happens once at the end, but something woven into every moment. Every breath, every heartbeat, every passing thought, all are little deaths. And yet, here you are, alive in the midst of them. So, the great death is simply the culmination of what has always been happening, the continual transformation of life. There is another way to see this. Consider music again. A song is made of notes and silences. Without the silence between the notes, the music would be noise. Without the ending of each note, there would be no melody. Death is the silence that makes the song of life possible. It is not a flaw in the song, it is the structure of the song itself. And so, when the final note comes, it is not a tragedy, it is the completion of the music. This way of seeing transforms how we relate to death. Instead of resisting it, we can honor it. Instead of fearing it, we can embrace it. And when we do, life itself becomes richer. We no longer cling to each moment in desperation, but receive it as a gift. We no longer waste our days in fear of the end, but live them fully, knowing that their impermanence is what makes them precious. But here is the deepest insight. You are not only the one who lives and dies, you are life itself, playing at being a person, dancing as a form, appearing for a time and dissolving again. When you die, it is not that life ends, it is that life stops playing this particular role and moves on to another. The actor leaves the stage, but the play continues. And in this sense, death is not the end of you, because the you thought you were was never the whole story. You are the stage itself, the light in which the play unfolds. So what happens when you die? From the perspective of the ego, the answer is simple. The story ends, the character dissolves, the memories fade. But from the perspective of life itself, nothing is lost. The river flows on. The music continues. And once you see this, death is no longer something to be feared, but something to be respected, even welcomed, as part of the great mystery of existence. I always say, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. In the same way, trying to imagine your own death is like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. It cannot be done, and this impossibility is the key, because it means that what you fear, the experience of nothingness, will never be experienced at all. Instead, life will simply return to the vastness from which it came, as it always has, as it always will. So perhaps the wisest response to the question of death is not an answer, but a shift of perspective, to stop asking what will happen to me and instead see that there is no separate me to be lost. Life is happening, life is dancing, and death is part of the rhythm. When you know this, you stop clinging, you stop resisting. You begin to live as though each moment were both the first and the last, which, in truth, it island. So what happens when you die? You return to what you have always been, the vast, timeless awareness in which all things appear and disappear. And when you realize this now, while you are still alive, death is no longer the great enemy. It is simply the other face of life. There comes a moment in every human life when the very thing you depend on, the thing you've trusted since childhood, simply stops working, the mechanism of effort. You push and push, you try to hold yourself together, you devote yourself to improvement, to goals, to plans, to becoming someone you can be proud of. And one day, without warning, the whole engine seizes. Nothing responds, nothing moves. You work harder, thinking perhaps you miscalculated, perhaps you didn't give enough, perhaps you simply have to exert more force. But the more you push, the less life offers in return. It is a bewildering kind of silence. You reach out into life with both hands, and it feels as though the universe has quietly stepped back. You find yourself asking questions you thought you had outgrown. Why isn't this working? What am I missing? Why does it feel like I am doing everything and going nowhere? And beneath those questions is another one, far more frightening, but also far more honest. What if nothing I do is enough? Now, that is the moment where most people panic. They scramble. They tighten their grip. They look for new techniques, new hacks, new philosophies promising results. But all of that is simply more effort, more resistance, more of the same fuel that was already burning you out. You see, life has a very peculiar way of speaking when you're going too fast. It stops answering, not as a punishment, but as a way of getting your attention. You think effort is what moves life, but it is actually life that moves you. And when life wants you still, when it wants you quiet, when it wants you to finally hear what lies beneath the noise of your striving, it takes away the illusion of forward motion. You may interpret that as failure, but it is simply a pause, a sacred pause. You think you've been abandoned by momentum, but in truth you have only been returned to yourself. Just look at the world. Rivers do not rush every moment. Even the tides rest. The seasons linger before shifting. A tree does not strain upward each day. Growth comes in pulses, in breaths. Expansion, stillness. Expansion, stillness. But the human mind insists that stillness means something is wrong. It calls it stagnation. It calls it failure. And because the world keeps praising endless motion, you have come to believe that if you are not advancing, you are falling behind. But life is not linear. It never has been. It spirals, it circles, it pauses, it waits for the right conditions. If you look carefully at the times when nothing moved for you, you will see that they were shaping you in ways action never could. People ask, why am I trying so hard and seeing nothing? And the answer is very simple. Because the part of you doing the trying is not the part that is meant to move. There is a deeper intelligence in you, one that does not measure your worth by progress, one that does not calculate value based on effort. It is the same intelligence that grows your hair and heals your wounds and keeps your heart beating while you sleep. It does not need your effort. In fact, your effort often gets in its way. Think of someone drowning. Their instinct is to thrash, to claw at the water, to fight for control. But the harder they struggle, the faster they sink. Only when they stop fighting, when they allow themselves to float, does the water hold them up. In the same way, your effort can sometimes be the very thing pulling you under. You are trying to swim in places where you are meant to float. Now, that does not mean effort is wrong. Effort has its place. But when effort is fueled by fear, by desperation, by the need to prove something to yourself or to the world, it becomes a burden. You carry it like a weight, imagining it will deliver you to some distant shore where everything finally makes sense. But effort cannot deliver you to a place that already exists beneath your feet. There is a reason your effort led nowhere, because the direction you were forcing yourself toward was never meant for you. If the door refuses to open, it is because there is nothing for you behind it. You may not see this now. You may think all your plans were sensible and well constructed. But the universe does not organize itself according to your expectations. It organizes itself according to resonance, according to timing, according to the unfolding of things that you cannot yet see. And when you push against that unfolding, the universe does not punish you. It simply waits. It waits for the moment you stop trying to bend life into the shape you prefer. It waits for the moment you surrender your insistence that you know what is best for you. It waits for the moment you are still enough to feel the movement of life itself. Because what feels like nowhere is not the absence of direction. It is the clearing of direction, the ground being leveled, the noise being softened, so that when life finally moves you, it moves you cleanly, effortlessly, without the friction of your resistance. Many people think the universe rewards effort, but look closely. The universe rewards alignment. Effort without alignment leads nowhere. Alignment without effort leads everywhere. You may not realize it, but the version of you that was pushing so hard no longer exists. Something in you is dying. Something in you is dissolving, not to hurt you, but to make space. The life that effort built is too small for who you are becoming. And life knows this. That is why it blocked you. That is why it held your progress still. You were reaching for a future that was beneath you. Now, none of this makes the moment easier. You wake up and it feels like your mind is foggy, your energy is heavy, your enthusiasm drained. It feels like failure because you have been trained to believe that constant striving is evidence of worth. But what if worth has nothing to do with striving? What if the universe is not measuring how hard you push, but how deeply you listen? You are not stuck. You are being emptied. And emptiness is not a mistake. It is preparation. When a bowl is full of old water, you cannot pour anything new into it. When a room is crowded, no one else can enter. When a path is cluttered, nothing can pass. Life clears you out so that something that actually belongs to you can take shape. But you must be still to see it. You must let the noise of your efforts settle. The modern world has made stillness feel shameful. People ask, what are you working on? What are you building? What are you producing? But no one asks, how deeply are you listening? How fully are you here? How much of yourself is aligned with your own experience? So when your effort leads nowhere, you think you've failed, but really you are being invited to rediscover a way of living that does not rely on exhaustion, a way of living that does not sacrifice the present for the illusion of a future, a way of living that trusts that life, not effort, is the thing that moves you. You are not in the wrong place. You are at the threshold. And thresholds never look like progress. They look like pauses. The universe is not withholding motion from you. It is preparing you for the kind of motion that will not break you. And if you stay with this moment long enough, something begins to shift. Not in the world around you, but in the felt sense of your own being. You start to notice that the tension you've carried for years begins to loosen. The constant background hum of urgency fades, even if only a little. You notice that you can breathe more deeply, even though nothing in your circumstances has changed. This is how the dissolution begins. First in the body, then in the mind, and only later in the life you live. You may not recognize it as movement because you are looking for movement in the form of results. But the universe often moves you long before you see where it is taking you. You see, effort is loud. It demands. It insists. It clenches its fists and tightens its jaw. Effort says, I must get somewhere. I must achieve something. I must become someone. Effort is the voice of the self that believes it is separate from life, responsible for controlling every outcome, and so it exhausts itself. But life is quiet. Life whispers. Life waits. Life unfolds without strain. It breathes you. It beats your heart. It digests your food without asking your permission. Life does not struggle. Life simply moves. And when your effort leads nowhere, it is usually because life is trying to teach you its rhythm. It is trying to show you that the moment you stop forcing movement, a deeper movement begins. But the mind resists this. It says, if I stop trying, everything will collapse. But what if everything is collapsing precisely because you keep trying? Trying to hold together what you have outgrown, trying to push through doors that are no longer meant to open, trying to maintain an identity that is no longer true. There are seasons in your life when you are meant to build, seasons when you are meant to strive, seasons when effort flows easily because you are aligned with the direction of life. But there are also seasons when you are meant to unravel, seasons when effort becomes impossible because something softer, something wiser is asking to be heard. When all your effort leads nowhere, you are in such a season of undoing, a season of clearing, a season of returning to the ground of yourself. You may not realize it yet, but the nowhere you fear is actually the stillness from which true direction emerges. When you look at your life through the lens of the mind, you see stagnation. But through the lens of awareness, you see gestation. Something is forming in you, something you cannot name yet. It is not ambition, it is not desire, it is not a goal. It is a different orientation altogether. A way of relating to life that is not built on effort but on presence. Most people live their lives relying on effort because they have never experienced the intelligence of presence. They don't trust stillness because they never learned to listen. They were taught that life rewards productivity. They were taught that hard work guarantees results. But if you look carefully, you will see that the moments that shaped you the most were rarely the ones you worked hardest for. They were the moments that arrived quietly, unexpectedly, without effort. You did not effort your way into meeting the most important people in your life. You did not effort your way into the moments that changed your heart, the experiences that softened you, the realizations that awakened you. Those came on their own. They came because life brought them. So when effort stops working, it is because life wants to bring you something new, something you cannot arrive at through force, something that requires you to be softer, quieter, more honest with yourself, something that comes only when the mind finally grows tired of its endless pushing and falls into silence. And this silence, uncomfortable as it may be, is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. It is the clearing where truth appears. It is in this silence that you begin to see the difference between the life you were trained to chase and the life that actually belongs to you. You start to question the motives behind your striving. Was it truly for growth? Or was it to avoid feeling unworthy? Was it truly for joy? Or was it for validation? Was it truly aligned with your nature? Or was it aligned with the expectations of others? You may discover that much of your effort was never really yours. It was inherited from fears that were never examined. It was shaped by environments that rewarded burnout. It was fueled by a misunderstanding of what makes life meaningful. When that misunderstanding dissolves, effort falls away on its own, not because you stop caring, but because you stop pretending. You stop pretending that pushing yourself beyond your limits will lead to peace. You stop pretending that success will fill the places inside you that ache. You stop pretending that effort alone can save you from the fear of not being enough. And once you stop pretending, you can finally rest. This rest is not laziness. It is not giving up. It is not weakness. It is a return to sanity. It is a return to alignment. It is the moment when you stop swimming against the current of your own life. From the outside, it may look like nothing is happening, but inside, the landscape is changing. Your nervous system begins to unwind. Your thoughts begin to slow. Your breath deepens. The frantic momentum that once carried you begins to dissolve. You are not failing. You are recalibrating. And in this recalibration, you start to notice things you were too busy to see before. The texture of your own awareness, the subtle ways your intuition speaks, the places in your body that have been tight for years, the dreams you abandoned without even realizing you had, the person you became while trying to become someone else. All of this begins to surface. It is not chaos, it is clarity. The truth is that effort was distracting you from yourself. It kept you busy, occupied, forward-focused. It kept you from feeling the deeper longing within you, the longing to simply be, the longing to return to a life that is not constantly demanding something from you, the longing to let life move you instead of trying to drag life behind you. And so, effort stops working. Not because you are unworthy, not because you are unprepared, but because you are being guided into a different mode of living, one where effort is no longer your identity, one where your direction comes from a quiet inner knowing rather than external pressure. This is why the universe so often leads people into these moments of nowhere, not to punish them, but to soften them, not to stop their life, but to redirect it, not to take away their control, but to remind them that they never needed control to begin with. When you reach the point where effort collapses, you begin to encounter the truth that effort was never the real source of your growth. Growth happened in the moments when you were open, when you surrendered, when you let yourself be touched by something deeper than your goals. And that is where you are now, at the threshold between effort and awareness, between striving and being, between noise and silence, between the life you tried to control and the life you are meant to live. If you can allow yourself to rest here, even for a moment, you will begin to feel the faint stirrings of a new movement. It does not rush, it does not demand, it does not require you to force anything. It simply invites you to listen, and in that listening, you will discover that nowhere is not a dead end. It is a doorway, the doorway through which every real change in your life has ever entered. There is a strange and wonderful thing that happens when you begin to trust the doorway that looks like nowhere. At first you approach it cautiously, still believing that perhaps you are making some terrible mistake by allowing your effort to rest. You have been trained for so long to equate movement with meaning that stillness feels like a kind of death. But as you linger there, the mind softens, the body loosens, and the deeper intelligence within you begins to rise like something that has been waiting in the dark for years. It rises slowly, quietly, in the same way dawn approaches the horizon. It does not announce itself, it simply brightens. It reveals. And what it reveals is the space beneath your striving, the part of you that was never exhausted to begin with. There is an awareness in you that has watched your entire life unfold. It has observed your victories and your failures, your moments of clarity and your moments of confusion, your seasons of abundance and your seasons of collapse. It has never been tired because it has never been the one doing the striving. It has only been witnessing. When you arrive in this space, the first thing you feel is relief. Not the kind of relief that comes from solving a problem, but the kind that comes from no longer needing to solve it. You realize that the problem was never your lack of effort, but your reliance on effort. You had mistaken force for intelligence, striving for direction, exhaustion for achievement. And the moment you recognize this, a great exhale moves through your entire being. Life becomes softer. The air feels different. You begin to sense that you are not trudging through a hostile universe, but participating in a movement that has always been supporting you, even when you were resisting it. This is the first quiet shift, the recognition that you are not lost. You were simply moving too quickly to feel the hands that were guiding you. You may think this realization brings immediate peace, but peace is not the first gift. The first gift is honesty, a profound honesty that rises from your chest like a tide that can no longer be pushed back. You begin to see the truth of your exhaustion, the truth of your longing, the truth of the life you have been carrying on your shoulders. And as these truths surface, they do not hurt you, they free you. You realize you have been exhausting yourself with expectations that were never aligned with your nature. You realize you have been chasing a version of yourself that was shaped more by fear than by authenticity. You realize that much of your striving came from the belief that you needed to become extraordinary, to be worthy of rest, of love, of belonging. And when this breaks open inside you, something remarkable happens. You stop running, not because you have nowhere left to go, but because you finally see that the running never brought you closer to anything real. It only brought you deeper into the maze of your own mind, a maze filled with ideals, standards, comparisons, imagined futures, and old wounds disguised as ambition. You were not navigating life. You were navigating your conditioning. And conditioning does not lead forward. It only loops. This is why effort led nowhere. Because you were running in circles that only felt like progress. The universe is too kind to let you waste your life in a maze. So it closed the doors that kept you spinning. It exhausted the strategies that no longer served you. It silenced the paths that were fueled by fear, not to punish you, but to liberate you. And liberation begins with stillness. Once you allow this stillness, even reluctantly, life begins to reorganize you from the inside out. It starts gently, like a whisper in the back of your awareness. You notice you are less interested in proving yourself. You notice you are less reactive to the pressures around you. You notice that the urge to force things weakens. You begin to see that you don't need to control life for life to move. It is here that you begin to learn the art of allowing. Allowing does not mean passivity. It does not mean giving up. It means listening. It means recognizing that every movement in life has a rhythm, and that rhythm cannot be rushed. If you push a seed too quickly, it dies. If you force a flower open, it collapses. If you try to make the ocean still, it churns. The nature of things must be honored, and you are part of nature. So when your effort leads nowhere, it is often because you were pushing yourself beyond the rhythm of your own becoming. You were demanding a harvest in the middle of winter. You were insisting on clarity during a season meant for undoing. You were looking for answers in a moment meant for silence. Life knows the rhythm even when you do not. And this is why surrender becomes the second gift. Not surrender to failure, but surrender to the deeper intelligence that is orchestrating your life. A surrender that feels less like giving up and more like being carried. As you settle into this surrender, a new form of strength emerges in you. Not the strength of tension, but the strength of openness. Not the strength of endurance, but the strength of awareness. You begin to notice that you can hold your experience more fully without collapsing under it. You realize that life has always been easier when you are not clutching at it. The mind may protest, saying you must be vigilant, you must plan, you must control, you must do something. But you begin to see that much of what the mind calls control is simply fear wearing a helpful mask. Control has exhausted you for years. Control has kept you in the maze. Control has convinced you that the world is unpredictable and that your safety depends on constant effort. But safety does not come from control. Safety comes from trust, from awareness, from presence, from the understanding that you are not navigating life alone. Life is navigating you. As this understanding deepens, your relationship with yourself changes in subtle but powerful ways. You no longer judge yourself for being tired. You no longer shame yourself for not knowing the next step. You no longer criticize yourself for pausing. Instead, you begin to treat yourself with the gentleness that life has been trying to teach you. You become less interested in rushing, less interested in proving, less interested in perfection, more interested in honesty, more interested in ease, more interested in alignment. This is the beginning of authentic living. You start to notice what drains you and what nourishes you. You start to choose rest without guilt. You start to slow down enough to hear your own intuition, which has been speaking to you all these years, but could not be heard over the noise of your effort. It is in this slowing that life begins to reveal its next direction. Not through pressure, but through pull. Not through force, but through resonance. You feel drawn to things that once seemed unimportant. You find clarity in moments that once felt quiet. You notice openings that were invisible when you were rushing past them. This is how life guides you. Gently, subtly, consistently, and as you follow this pull, something miraculous begins to happen. The movement you have been waiting for returns, but it does not come with strain. It comes with grace. Suddenly, the path that once felt blocked begins to open. Opportunities that once seemed impossible appear naturally. People who resonate with your new way of being begin to enter your life. Conversations align. Timing aligns. Energy aligns. Movement returns. Not because you forced it, but because you became aligned with it. Your life begins to expand again, but now from the inside out. You are not chasing the world, you are meeting it. You begin to realize that the pauses in your life were not interruptions, they were recalibrations. They were the universe adjusting your direction. They were the moments when life was saving you from futures that did not belong to you. Every period where effort led nowhere was a moment where you were being redirected toward a place where effort would be unnecessary. Because alignment does not require force. It requires presence. You may think you lost time in those seasons, but what you lost was not time. What you lost was the illusion that you could control your way into peace, and what you gained was far greater. You gained the ability to listen. You gained the capacity to feel. You gained the clarity to recognize what is truly meant for you. When you look back, you will see that the times when your effort failed were the very times when your life was protecting you from paths you were forcing yourself into, protecting you from versions of yourself you no longer needed to become, protecting you from directions that would have drained you even further. You were not failing, you were being held, and now you stand in a different kind of space. A space where life no longer feels like something you must conquer, but something you can participate in. A space where your worth is not tied to productivity. A space where you can meet yourself without judgment. A space where you can rest without apology. From this space, effort becomes something new. It becomes an expression of alignment rather than a compensation for fear. You act when moved, not when pressured. You move when guided, not when panicked. You work from fullness, not from depletion. Life begins to feel lighter, more fluid, more honest. It becomes less about achieving and more about unfolding, less about getting somewhere and more about being here. The weight you carried for years lifts, not because you accomplished something extraordinary, but because you stopped arguing with the rhythm of your own becoming. When all your effort leads nowhere, it is because you are being led somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter, somewhere more real, somewhere your mind could not lead you because your mind is trained to repeat the past. Awareness is what moves you into the future. This is the gift hidden inside exhaustion, the return to what has always been guiding you, the return to the intelligence that does not strain, the return to the part of you that is already whole. You were never meant to live your life struggling upstream. You were meant to flow with the current of your own truth. You were meant to follow the quiet pull of the life that is aligned with your nature. You were meant to allow what is real to rise and allow what is false to fall away. You have spent so long trying to become someone worthy, not realizing that the worthiness was already there beneath the layers of effort. And when effort collapses, you are finally able to feel it. This is why life stops you. This is why effort fails. This is why you find yourself in seasons of stillness. Not because you are unworthy of movement, but because you are being prepared for a different kind of movement. A movement that does not exhaust you but expresses you. A movement that does not pull you away from yourself but brings you deeper into the heart of your own life. The greatest transformation of your life will not come from striving, it will come from listening. And now, after everything has collapsed, after all the doors have refused to open, after the exhaustion has stripped you bare, you are finally quiet enough to hear. And what you hear is this: you were never meant to force your way through life. You were meant to fall into alignment with it. And once you do, everything that once felt unreachable begins to unfold naturally. Not because you worked harder, but because you stopped resisting the truth of who you are. This is what happens when all your effort leads nowhere. It is the beginning of the life that is actually yours. Have you noticed how rare it has become to find someone who truly thinks? I don't mean someone who merely reacts, repeats, or argues. I mean someone who pauses, reflects, and sees. It seems as though the modern world has become a theater of noise, where the loudest voices echo endlessly and the quietest truths go unnoticed. Thinking, that subtle and beautiful dance of the mind, has been replaced by something mechanical, something hurried, something hollow. And in that silence between all the noise, something essential to our humanity is vanishing. If you observe carefully, you'll see that thinking is no longer rewarded. What is rewarded instead is speed, agreement, conformity. A mind that questions is seen as inconvenient, even dangerous. We are surrounded by machines that feed us information faster than we can process it, yet slower than we can understand it. Every headline, every post, every flicker of a notification calls to us like a siren, pulling our attention outward, scattering it in 1,000 directions. The tragedy is not that we have access to too little information, but that we have too much of it and too little wisdom to discern. The mind, which was once the explorer of mysteries, now behaves like a sponge, absorbing endlessly without digesting. We mistake opinions for insight, repetition for truth, and noise for knowledge. And slowly, the most extraordinary gift we possess, the ability to think freely, dulls into passive obedience. This, I believe, is one of the great tragedies of modern civilization. Not that people are uneducated, but that they are unthinking. We have trained entire generations not to ask questions, but to seek answers that already fit their comfort. The school teaches you to remember, not to understand. The media teaches you to react, not to reflect. The world teaches you to belong, not to awaken. And so, critical thinking becomes an act of rebellion. Why is this happening? Because to think deeply is to become uncertain. To see clearly is to become uncomfortable. True thought requires stillness, courage, and above all, humility. It is far easier to follow the crowd than to stand alone with your own doubt. The masses have discovered that certainty feels safer than curiosity, and so they cling to their beliefs like children clutching toys, afraid of the dark without them. Yet the irony is that this comfort enslaves. When you no longer think, you no longer see. And when you no longer see, you no longer live consciously. You drift through existence like a leaf on a river, moved by currents you do not understand, believing you are free because you do not resist. The philosopher Noam Chomsky once warned that society manufactures consent. I think it goes even deeper than that. Society manufactures identity. It tells you what to care about, what to fear, what to believe, what to hate, and even what to love. It builds your opinions before you ever have the chance to form them. And so, what you call thinking becomes a mere reflection of programming. The world whispers its script into your mind, and you, unknowingly, become its voice. This, my friend, is collective stupidity, not stupidity in the sense of low intelligence, but in the sense of a mind that has ceased to function as its own. A collective sleep, a trance. Observe how people consume information today. A headline flashes, an image provokes, and the mind leaps to judgment. There is no pause, no distance, no reflection. Reaction has replaced reason. Emotion has replaced evidence. Outrage has become the new form of participation. But thinking, real thinking, is not reactive. It is contemplative. It begins not with an opinion, but with a question. And questions, in the modern world, make people uneasy. Why? Because a question opens space, and in that space, illusions begin to tremble. The world, in its current form, does not want you to think. Thinking people are difficult to control. They question the game instead of playing it. They see through illusions, and illusions are the lifeblood of social order. The system thrives on your attention, your reaction, your distraction. It cannot thrive on your awareness. That is why, in the age of information, ignorance has become profitable. The algorithms that guide your attention are not designed to show you truth. They are designed to show you what keeps you engaged. Outrage keeps you scrolling. Agreement keeps you comfortable. Division keeps you online. And all the while, your mind is being fed not with nourishment, but with noise. The philosopher Marshall McLuhan once said, "The medium is the message." What he meant is that the way information is delivered shapes the very structure of our thought. And what are the dominant mediums today? Short clips, quick headlines, emotional bursts. A world of fragments, designed for speed, not depth. A world where we are trained to consume feelings, not ideas. And when a mind is trained for fragments, it forgets how to see the whole. Notice how difficult it has become to read a full paragraph without glancing at your phone. Notice how quickly your mind seeks stimulation when faced with silence. This restlessness, this inability to be still, is not natural, it is learned. The mind has been conditioned to seek constant novelty. But true understanding, like a deep river, requires stillness. It cannot be found in the noise. Thinking demands patience. Reflection demands silence. But the modern world fears both. It fills every quiet space with sound, every moment of waiting with distraction, every uncertainty with instant answers. And so we lose the sacred art of being alone with our own minds. When I was a child, I would spend hours watching the movement of water, how it flowed effortlessly around stones, how it reflected the sky. It taught me that truth is not something you force. It arises naturally in stillness. The more you chase it, the more it hides. The more you relax into it, the more it reveals itself. Thought, too, is like that. The deeper truths of life cannot be forced through speed or repetition. They appear in the quiet spaces between words, in the subtle awareness that arises when you are no longer trying to be right. But that kind of awareness is rare now. The collective mind has become obsessed with being right rather than being real. People no longer listen to understand, they listen to reply. They argue not to seek truth, but to defend identity. And so conversation becomes combat, dialogue becomes theater, and thought becomes performance. This, my friend, is the tragedy of our age. We have mistaken thinking for noise. Look closely at how education contributes to this illusion. Schools teach students to repeat what has been said, not to discover what has not. The child who questions is told to stay in line. The one who memorizes earns approval. Slowly, the curiosity that was once natural in every child becomes replaced with anxiety, the fear of being wrong. And so we grow into adults who would rather be confidently mistaken than humbly uncertain. But uncertainty is the very birthplace of truth. To think critically is to dance with uncertainty. It is to look at your own beliefs and say, perhaps I am mistaken. It is to realize that truth cannot belong to you because truth is not a possession. It is an experience. It reveals itself only when you stop clinging to conclusions. The Buddha once said, in the end, the greatest source of suffering is clinging. We often think he meant attachment to things, but he also meant attachment to ideas. When you cling to an opinion, you close your mind to possibility. And when you close your mind, you cease to think. So we must ask, why are we so afraid of thinking? Why do we run from silence, from complexity, from the unknown? Perhaps it is because thought exposes the fragility of the ego. The moment you think deeply, you see how much of your life has been borrowed, how your beliefs are hand-me-downs, how your opinions were never truly yours. That realization can be painful. It shatters illusions, but it is also the beginning of liberation. When you see how much of your mind has been programmed by society, you begin to reclaim it. You begin to see that intelligence is not about knowing, but about seeing. The wise are not those who have more answers, but those who have fewer illusions. And so, the disappearance of critical thinking is not just a cultural crisis, it is a spiritual one. It marks the moment when humanity stopped looking inward and became fully absorbed by the surface of life. It marks the shift from depth to image, from experience to performance, from being to appearing. In this world, people no longer want to understand, they want to look like they understand. They no longer seek wisdom, they seek validation. And as long as the applause is loud enough, they never notice how quiet their inner voice has become. But even within this noise, there are still those who see. They are the quiet observers, the ones who pause before they respond, who feel the weight of words, who refuse to let the current of collective thought carry them away. They are the ones who recognize that truth cannot be shouted. It must be heard. You can be one of them. You can awaken in the middle of the noise. It begins with a simple act, one that feels almost radical in this age. Pause. Just pause. Before reacting, before judging, before believing. In that pause, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see the machinery of your own mind. You begin to recognize how your thoughts arise, how they are shaped, and how easily they can be manipulated. This awareness is the seed of freedom, because the real prison is not outside you. It is the belief that you are thinking, when in fact you are only repeating. The modern world does not need more opinions. It needs more awareness, more minds that are willing to question not only others but themselves, more souls that have the humility to admit that they do not know, and the courage to explore what lies beyond that not knowing. The loss of critical thinking is not the end of human intelligence. It is merely the darkness before a deeper light. The mind, like the sky, cannot remain clouded forever. Eventually, the storm of noise will pass, and when it does, those who have kept their silence will see clearly. Perhaps that is the true role of thinkers in this age, not to argue, not to prove, but to remind others that silence is not ignorance. It is the beginning of real thought. And so, we end this reflection where all true thinking begins with awareness. Awareness that the collective mind is asleep, awareness that most thought today is imitation, and awareness that awakening begins not with shouting at others, but with listening to yourself. Because when you begin to listen deeply, the noise of the world fades, and the music of reality begins to play again. You see, awakening the mind is not a matter of adding more information. It is not a process of collecting facts or learning to argue better than others. To think clearly is not to fill the mind, but to empty it of noise. For clarity does not arise from accumulation, but from stillness. The mind must learn to see without distortion, to rest in the space between opinions, and to discover once again the natural intelligence that was always there beneath the surface. When you were a child, your mind was curious, open, and alive. You questioned everything, not because you wanted to be clever, but because the world was a wonder to you. But as you grew older, the world began to answer your questions before you could even ask them. Schools told you what to think, society told you what to want, and fear told you what not to say. Slowly, your curiosity was replaced with certainty, and certainty, in time, turned into pride. Yet deep within, there remains a quiet voice. It speaks not in words, but in the gentle pull of wonder. It whispers, "What if?" And in that whisper lies the possibility of rediscovering what it means to think. To think critically is not to destroy your beliefs, but to understand them. It is to look within and see that every conclusion you hold is a doorway, not a wall. The moment you see that every thought can be questioned, you are no longer its prisoner. You may ask, how can one begin to awaken this kind of mind in a world so determined to keep it asleep? The first step is awareness. Awareness that you are surrounded by noise designed to control your attention. Every headline, every debate, every moment of outrage is a hook. The world does not need your thought, it needs your reaction. When you understand this, you begin to see that your greatest rebellion is to pause. Try it. The next time you feel provoked by something you read or hear, do not respond immediately. Feel the space that opens between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space lies your freedom. That space is the birth of true thought. It is what separates the conscious human being from the automatic machine. The world moves fast, but your awareness does not have to. When you slow down, you begin to see how others are swept away by their emotions, their ideologies, their need to be right. You will feel the pull too, but you will no longer be controlled by it. To think clearly in this world requires the same qualities that meditation requires: stillness, patience, humility. For thinking, like meditation, is not about reaching conclusions, it is about seeing clearly. The conclusions come by themselves when the seeing is clear. But our society is impatient. It wants answers, not awareness. It wants noise, not nuance. That is why true thinkers are often misunderstood. They appear uncertain, hesitant, even silent. But in their silence there is more truth than in all the noise of those who claim to know. Critical thinking, at its core, is not about being skeptical of others. It is about being honest with yourself. It begins with the recognition that your own mind can deceive you, that what feels true may not be true, that what seems right may only be familiar. When you begin to question your own certainty, the door to wisdom opens. You might think this sounds like doubt, but there is a great difference between doubt and fear. Doubt is alive, flexible, and humble. It is the beginning of discovery. Fear is rigid and defensive. It clings to beliefs as shields. The mind that doubts is open to new light. The mind that fears is trapped in its own shadow. So begin by doubting yourself, not in the sense of insecurity, but in the sense of curiosity. Ask, why do I believe what I believe? Who told me this? What would I discover if I looked beyond it? Such questions do not destroy faith, they purify it. They strip away the false until only what is real remains. When you practice this kind of inquiry, you will begin to see how much of your thinking has been borrowed. You will notice how certain phrases echo in your mind as if placed there by unseen hands. You will see how the opinions you defend most passionately often come from sources you never examined. This is not a failure, it is the beginning of awakening. To awaken is not to fight the collective stupidity of the world. It is to stop feeding it. When you refuse to engage in meaningless argument, when you stop reacting to provocation, when you choose silence over noise, you are no longer part of the machine. You become a space of clarity within it, and that clarity spreads. The world changes not because you force it, but because your awareness becomes a mirror in which others begin to see themselves. The Buddha once said that enlightenment is the end of ignorance, not the beginning of new knowledge. In the same way, clear thinking is not the acquisition of cleverness, it is the end of confusion. It is the simple realization that you do not need to know everything to see clearly. You only need to be free of illusion. But illusions are comfortable. They give us a sense of identity, a sense of belonging. That is why many people prefer to remain asleep. To think critically is to risk losing your certainty, your tribe, your image of yourself. It is to walk into the unknown with no guarantee of what you will find. Yet that is the only place truth can live. The known is safe, but the safe is dead. The unknown is alive, unpredictable, and full of discovery. It is in that unknown that the individual mind separates from the collective. Collective thinking seeks agreement. Critical thinking seeks understanding. The collective wants conformity. The awakened mind wants freedom. That is why thinkers have always been outcasts in every age. They belong to no side because truth has no side. But here lies the paradox. When you begin to think clearly, you may at first feel alone. The noise of the world will seem unbearable. You will see through manipulation, hypocrisy, fear, and you may feel like a stranger among your own kind. Yet this is not loneliness, it is clarity. And as clarity deepens, you begin to see that there are others, quiet ones, thoughtful ones, people who, like you, have chosen silence over noise. When enough of these quiet minds arise, the world begins to change. Thinking is not something you do for society, it is something you do because you love truth. When you love truth, you stop needing to win. You stop needing to be right. You no longer see others as enemies or fools. You see them as mirrors of your own humanity, lost in different dreams. You stop fighting and start understanding. And understanding is the beginning of compassion. This is why critical thinking, at its highest form, becomes spiritual. It is not just about logic, it is about liberation. When you begin to think clearly, you begin to see that your thoughts are not you. They are movements of the mind, waves on the ocean of consciousness. You can watch them come and go without being carried away. In that watching, you become free. The disappearance of critical thinking, therefore, is not merely an intellectual crisis. It is a loss of awareness. It is the collective forgetting that we are not our opinions, not our identities, not our sides. We are the awareness in which these things arise and dissolve. When you realize this, you stop defending illusions and start living truthfully. It takes courage to think in this way. It takes courage to face yourself. But that courage is the only true freedom left in this world. The moment you stop fearing your own thoughts, you stop fearing the world. The moment you stop clinging to what you know, you begin to see what you are. Perhaps you have noticed how easy it is today to lose yourself in the collective. Every scroll, every debate, every trend invites you to forget who you are. But when you begin to think again, truly think, you reclaim yourself from the tide. You begin to notice how the world pulls you into its rhythm of urgency and distraction. You see it, you smile, and you return to stillness. That is all it takes to remain free. And from that stillness, a new kind of intelligence begins to grow. Not the intelligence of analysis, but the intelligence of awareness. It does not divide the world into good and bad, right and wrong. It simply sees. And in that seeing, wisdom is born. The wise do not fight stupidity. They illuminate it. They do not argue with ignorance. They outgrow it. For the light does not need to defeat the darkness, it only needs to shine. So do not despair at the state of the world. The world has always been full of noise. What matters is whether you can remain silent within it. Not silent in the sense of speech, but silent in the mind. That is where the revolution begins, because once you have tasted that silence, you can never again be fooled by noise. Once you have learned to think clearly, you can never again be deceived by illusion. The world may still be chaotic, but within you there will be order. The crowd may still shout, but within you there will be calm. And when you walk through life with that calm, others will feel it. Without saying a word, you will remind them of something they have forgotten. The truth is not something shouted from rooftops, but something found in the quiet heart of awareness. That is how change begins. Not with movements, not with slogans, but with one mind that decides to see clearly. So if you ask me how to bring critical thinking back into a world that has lost it, I would say this: start by being still. Stop reacting. Stop agreeing. Stop disagreeing. Simply observe. Watch the play of ideas, the dance of opinions, the endless struggle for validation. See it for what it is, an elaborate dream. And in seeing, you awaken. You may not change the world overnight, but you will change your relationship to it. You will no longer be pulled by its madness. You will see the machinery of illusion and smile gently, knowing it cannot touch you. And in that smile, you will find peace. Critical thinking is not the rejection of the world. It is the art of seeing the world as it is, without distortion, without projection. It is the recognition that truth is not something to be owned, but something to be lived. It is the quiet intelligence that listens, reflects, and responds, not from fear, but from understanding. In a time when most people are shouting, the thinker listens. In a time when most people are fighting, the thinker observes. And in that quiet observation, wisdom returns. So let the world rush, let it rage and divide and argue. You simply watch. You simply think. Because every moment you choose awareness over reaction, you make the world a little less blind. This is not an escape. It is the beginning of true participation. For the world does not need more noise, it needs more clarity. And clarity begins with you. So think, my friend, not because thinking will make you superior, but because thinking will make you free. Think not to win, but to understand. Think not to build another ideology, but to dissolve the ones that have blinded you. And when you finally see through them all, you will laugh, because you will realize that the truth was never hidden. It was simply quiet, waiting patiently beneath the noise for you to stop and listen. In that moment, the age of collective stupidity will end for you. And perhaps, through you, it may begin to end for others as well.